Hello again, it is I, Freeza700, and we are back with some Warhammer fantasy lore. This time we are going over what is Bretonnia. My favorite faction. I love Bretonnia so much. In fact, now that I have a better processor, I may actually showcase a lot of Bretonnian combat later on in other YouTube videos since I can record better now. But besides that, let's go into the lore. What the fuck are they?
After the
So, what the fuck is Bretonnia exactly? Well, it's a vast rural country that is second in size to the Empire, which is that huge superpower human faction to the east of Bretonnia. But Bretonnia itself lies to the west, close to the Great Ocean, and it consists mostly of farmland, windmills, and occasionally you'll come across a castle with a giant town built around it. Now, there is no cities in Bretonnia, not like the Empire. The Empire has cities, where it's walls around the houses and around the castle, all that nice stuff. Bretonnia is not like that at all. Bretonnia is, here's the castle, and the village is built around the castle. So really the only person who's protected is the king or the duke of the realm. Now, this human kingdom is rather big, and is actually second in size to the Empire in both military strength, cultural, and technology-wise. Although, there are a lot of primitive technology that goes on in Bretonnia itself, and that just comes from their sense of honor and culture. Now, besides that though, how did this society become? Because clearly this feudal society didn't just spring out of a hole like the dwarves. Like, clearly this came from somewhere, right? Well, let's get into it. So it began long ago before Bretonnia was even a kingdom. This is how far back this history lesson is going to go for some of you boys. Now, way back when, chaos invaded the world. Now, originally at that time, the lizardmen and the high elves were the only species that really existed. The dwarves did exist, but they were hiding inside the mountain just waiting for chaos to end. Meanwhile, though, the lizardmen lost pretty much majority of their whole empire, and right when they were about to lose everything, the high elves succeeded in defeating chaos by casting a few spells that just sucked chaos out of oblivion. This is the short version, so for those of you who know Warhammer Fantasy lore and are probably triggered about how short and generalized I'm making this is because this is all about Bretonnia, so go fuck yourself. But besides that, once the high elves won and defeated chaos, they began colonizing the world. They were like, shit, this land is ripe for the taking. Now, of course, there were greenskins all around, and there were dwarves who also began colonizing, and this is where it becomes interesting. So Bretonnia, before humans inhabited it, was originally a giant colony for the High Elves. There are many colonies, many cities dotted along the coast that would later become human settlements in Bretonnia. Because after all, it's a great piece of land. It's mostly flat, tons of farmland, a few hills, tons of forest for you to chop down. There's a lot of resources here, and you can make some good wine. This is stuff that High Elves really like. And this is stuff that Bretonnians would later grow their culture around. But a few centuries later, the dwarves started growing into the Grey Mountains, which lies in between the Empire and Bretonnian lands, is the Grey Mountains. And that's where the dwarves started meeting the High Elves. And after a few centuries, things were nice. But then all of a sudden, the High Elves pissed off the dwarves, and the dwarves, being very grudgeful people, they couldn't let an insult stand. So this sparked the first war between two good guys, which became known as the War of the Beards. High Elves versus dwarves, who would win, right? Clearly we know the answer to this. The dwarves won. But here's the interesting part. So the High Elves were losing, and the king of the High Elves ordered the colonies in Bretonnia to retreat back to Ulthuan, their magical island, and their home, in order to defend better against the dwarves, because there's no way they could keep holding their colonies. It was clearly too taxing on them militarily. Now, many of the colonies refused to retreat, but with no armies to defend them from the dwarves, they were left to one option: go into the forest. Now, the forest they ran into became known as Athel-Loren, the magical forest that has wood elves in it. These are those elves. This is where they ran to. Now, while the war raged on, the war started to conclude. And when it was over, or really just the beginning of the end of the war, a bunch of human tribals from the north came out of nowhere and started migrating into these now new lands. Because the dwarves didn't take over these cities, they destroyed them. They utterly destroyed them. They had no real idea of ever owning these colonies. They just wanted to get rid of the high elves. So all this land is now available for both orcs and humans. So these human tribals came in and started taking up. Now these human tribals, who the fuck were they? I don't really know what they were called. I just know more or less their story. They were a bunch of agricultural people. So they were really good at planting. They were really good at cultivating. They were really up to the land. They lived off the land the best they could. And their weapons weren't really advanced. They were flint-based weapons. So you're looking at really, really shitty swords. Not even iron, just flint. Now, these people were devoted to the old faith. So they were devoted more to just the gods of like hunting, gods of agriculture, stuff like that. No really powerful gods, no named gods per se. Now, while they were there, they were getting beaten senselessly by the orcs. And the orcs were just keep on continually taking over the human tribes and constantly whooping their ass. Now, mind you, orcs take from people that they destroy. So since the orcs keep beating these humans who have really shitty weapons, the orcs have shitty weapons. This became a good fucking thing because to the east, where the Empire is, the Empire tribals were warlike. And one tribe of the Empire tribes migrated over to the east, to the west where the Bretonnian lands were. This tribe was known as the Bretonnia, and the Bretonnia were warlike. They loved their horses. They mixed with these human agriculturalists and created a society that would become the very foundations of Bretonnia. So, the Bretonnia tribe was very strong, very fit. Obviously, they were bigger than the agricultural ones, but not all of the Bretonnia were warriors. Now, they may have a warlike tribe, but not all of them are warriors. Same with Sparta. Even though everyone's a warrior, they're still farmers. So, the agricultural tribes of Bretonnia mixed and mingled with the Bretonnia. And in this exchange, they set up this society where the young Bretonnia males, who were decided amongst the tribe, would train from birth to become excellent combatants, given the best food, the best wine, the best women, the best training, the best everything. And in this, they were allowed to become bigger and stronger than their fellow tribe. And they were given one job: defend the tribe from the orcs, from whatever would come and attack. But in order to defend the tribe, they would have to reside in these giant wooden watchtowers. Now, I shouldn't say giant, they're more like 10 feet tall, they're not that big. But I like to emphasize things because I'm a little dramatic, so excuse me if I gave you the wrong portrait. But they would sit inside these wooden watchtowers and defend their tribe whenever orcs came or whenever really anything came, beastmen included. Beastmen were also a big part of the problem in Bretonnia. Now this started the foundations of the feudal society in Bretonnia. So now the question is, what happened from then to now? Well, let's get into it. So later on, Sigmar, who is the deity of the empire, he was just a normal man. But he united all of the empire tribes and slaughtered the orcs and brokered an alliance with the dwarves. So now his people have access to metalworking, to masonry, to advanced gunpowder, and they were able to push the orcs out of the empire lands. Bretonnia at this time was still fractured tribes that were still living up to this system, but now they had warlord Bretonnies who kind of more or less owned just bigger tribes. Big enough tribes to have armies inside them, although the armies are still rather shitty because they're still flint-based weaponry. And it was around this time that Sigmar, once he was done uniting his empire and creating the empire, he offered them a chance to confederate with the empire. Here's the problem. The people of the Bretonnia, although they can trace their roots back to the empire, that is the only common ground they have. Besides that, the two cultures are so different that they declined. There was just no way they would ever let a foreign body like the empire rule over them. There was just no way in hell that was going to happen. And especially since the people itself were still divided. They still had the same issues that the empire just dealt with. And the empire wasn't in any shape to come help them. So it wasn't a good idea to mix. Well, eventually, over time, a few decades later, a few centuries later, the dwarves inside the Great Mountains started to like the Bretonnia. And the Bretonnia people started to learn things like metalworking and masonry. But they didn't learn gunpowder. And they didn't learn a few things that those dwarves taught the empire. Because again, the dwarves and the empire had a very unique alliance. The people of the Bretonnia and Bretonnia didn't have that chance. They never had those unique circumstances to really ally with the dwarves. They just had good trade deals with the dwarves, like giving food or clearing out a few orcs, but never anything as big as liberating their king from an orc holding, like Sigmar did. But the metalworking and masonry that they learned did lead to the first castle being built and led to the first time they ever made plate armor for their Bretonnia warlords and their war horses to wear. This was a huge game changer. Well, around the imperial calendar of 770, the warlords were now changed to dukes. They were now named dukes, in which their castles were now known as small dukedoms, which was around 16 different countries of dukedoms. Later on, 200 years later, around 930 imperial calendar, the orcs started to get a little rowdy. They were getting way out of hand, ridiculously out of hand. And they started to overrun the countryside. Things are starting to look shit for Bretonnia again. Because as I said, orcs usually are as well equipped as the culture they're fighting. Well, in this case, the orcs are starting to get really beefy. Because now Bretonnia's got plate armor and stuff. Guess what the orcs are starting to get? Well, around 930 imperial calendar, this is the start of the unification of Bretonnia. So, Bretonnia at this time, orcs are overrunning it. They actually destroyed a whole dukedom, which is very fascinating, because that's never happened before. And now the Bretonnia is now on high alert to try dealing with it, but they're not in the shape to really unify and attack the orc threat. And the orc horde is just getting bigger and bigger off of all these skirmishes that the Bretonnia are seriously losing to. But then, to top it all off, beastmen are now overrunning the forest. So now, if they run to the forest, they're just as fucked as they would be standing out in the open to fight the orcs. And then, even better, Cetra him fucking dead self shows up with his undead armies and start claiming some territory. Oh boy, things are looking pretty bad. And then to make it even better, because we just gotta have diarrhea on this fucking country. But now, the Northerners, the Chaos Worshippers, are now invading from the north. Whew. If I lived in Bretonnia at this time, I would have given up and just went to the Empire. Bretonnia looks like it's about to be destroyed entirely. Well, finally, after the year 974 imperial calendar, a duke decided not to give in. He said, no, there is still hope for Bretonnia. This duke was named Giles Le Breton. Giles Le Breton and his two other duke friends began a huge crusade to purge everyone from fucking Bretonnia and to free Bretonnia and unite Bretonnia against these threats. There was a problem, though. these three dukes and their army, as grand as it was, they were inexperienced and they weren't equipped enough to deal with such a huge threat from all sides. Especially since the orcs now outnumbered them and out-manpowered them because their weapons were still better than the inexperienced grand armies of these three dukes. That is when Giles Le Breton with his armies were camping nearby a lake. And all of a sudden, while Giles Le Breton was walking with his tattered banner, he walked upon a lake where this beautiful, mystical woman was floating above the water. Huh, that's strange. And the men of his army were scared shitless. Some of them wanted to attack her thinking she was a witch. Others wanted to run away. But Giles stood there and asked the lady kindly to bless his banner as he dipped it into the water. And as he pulls his banner back out from the water, not only is it renewed, but it's also glowing with this light of purity. That is when the lady offers Giles to take a sip of her chalice along with his two fellow dukes. This chalice blessed them, but not only blessed them, it gave them superhuman powers like increased strength, increased speed, and longevity. So anyone who takes a sip of this chalice is not going to die of old age. That's the interesting part about that. That's the blessing of the lady. But not only this, all the men in the army, every single one of them, started begging for the lady and dipping their weapons, armor, and horses into the lake, asking to be blessed. Every single one of them got their wish. Finally, the whole army is kitted out. The whole army is blessed. And then the next morning, the orcs came. Now, the orcs outnumbered them easily 10-1. They were looking for an easy fight. This is when Giles Le Breton led his horses through the horde. Now, when I say through the horde, I mean literally through the horde. Sorry there, I'm getting hiccups. Now, when they charged through the horde with their horses and blessed weapons, they actually cut all the way through the horde and then stopped and looked back and saw they actually killed every single fucking orc in this army. And then from there on, Giles united the whole Bretonnian kingdom by just going on this huge crusade where him and his followers would just gather more Grail Knights, more guys would sip out of the Grail, more guys would get their weapons blessed in a lake, and more guys just started piling onto his massive army, and all of them pledged fealty to Giles Le Breton. This is what became the first Royarch. The first one who is the king of kings in Bretonnia was Giles Le Breton. He united all of Bretonnia against everything, the undead, the beastmen, and the orcs. Well, finally, after uniting all of Bretonnia, he laid some ground rules, some ground laws, but in one final battle, he didn't realize this was going to be his last. Amidst the battle, he got shot in the back with a black arrow against a bunch of orcs. Now, this is already a little suspicious because one, orc arrow boys suck at aiming, and two, their arrows are so shittily made that I doubt it would pierce plate armor. I speculate it was probably the lady herself doing this, but either way, the black arrow killed him damn near instantly. He still had enough time, though, to tell his companions to leave him in a lake, to be laid to rest with the goddess, the Lady of the Lake. So his companions found a lake nearby, and surprisingly there was a boat. So they put his body in a boat, casted him away, and the mist of the lake accepted the boat where he just disappeared. No one knows where his body went to. This is where some people speculate that Giles Le Breton is the Green Knight. I am not going to spoil that, though. I will say that there is some credence to that theory, but who knows who he really is? Because after all, he's a servant of the lady, and Giles is dead, as far as we know. Now, Giles being dead, though, led to some interesting things, because now it became Well, who owns his kingdom? Well, his son, yeah, but his son has never drank from the grail. His son has never been blessed by the lady. And that is where it became the new law that in order for you to be the Royarch, you have to be both blessed by the lady and drank from the grail. Now, in order to be blessed by the lady, you must be blessed by her voice, which would be the Fae Enchantress, which is just a lady imbued with the powers of the Lady of the Lake. She's a magical spellcaster, obviously. And drink from the Grail. Because the Grail, as I said before, has magical properties that gives you superhuman capabilities. Now, how does the Society of Bretonnia work? This has been a very long video, so let's get this wrapped up. Well, essentially, the society is a feudal society, where the peasant is the lowest level of society. And above the peasant is the nobles. Now, every noble is a knight. Now, above the nobles is the dukes. The dukes are more or less the people who own land. And then there's the king. The king owns all the land in the realm. And as I said, there's 16 realms, so there's 16 different kings. Should be. There's a few realms that don't have kings because of certain history behind them. We will get into that into other videos. But the king above kings, the one who tells them everything, is the Royarch. That is the one who will unite Bretonnia. Now, sometimes the Royarch won't do much, so the kings pretty much are up to their own devices, which is most of the time, honestly. But when it comes down to it, how does it function? How does a society work? Well, the laws are made by the king. The land is owned by the king. The education you have is given to you by the king. Nothing is not the king's, but the Royarch can overrule the king in matters of law. As far as I remember, it is only law. So if it's anything like, oh, who owns this? That's not the Royarch's decision because that's your realm. But if it's what goes on in your realm, the Royarch definitely has a piece. Now, in order to be Royarch, as I said, you must be blessed by the lady and have drinking from the Grail. But there's a reason why. And the reason why is because this shows that you are the highest order of chivalry, justice, and honor. You are the personification of these traits. This is what you live by. Now, you may think, well, what is the chivalry, justice, and honor thing all about? Why are they based about that? What is so fascinating about that in their society? Well, there's a reason for that. There's a duty of the peasant, and then there's the duty of the knight. This is where you really see how terrible of a society Bretonnia is. So the peasant's job is to provide whatever he can to the king, whether it's goods, services, or his very own body to the king. Now, that being said, the king owns everything. So the house the peasant possesses is not the peasant's. In fact, it's more accurate to say that the peasant is just temporarily living there till the king decides, you know what, I think you're better off for something else, so you live here instead. Another peasant's gonna claim this area. All your belongings is mine. Your body is literally my property. And that's where you come into the duty of the knight. The knight, duke, and king's job is to protect the peasant and clear injustices that occur throughout the land. This is not exactly the case, though. This does not happen all the time. In fact, sometimes injustices are brought upon the peasants by the nobility. So you can kind of see how this isn't exactly the case all the time. But also, sometimes if the peasants are being killed or massacred, the knights and the king himself won't rush to protect the peasants. They'll just sit by and go, well, yes, it's my duty to protect the peasants, but I can't protect them all. And also, I'm not breaking my vow because I am going to help those peasants just later on. That is how they bullshit their way to really living up to their oath. This is why I said the king must be the personification of these values where he will actually rush to their aid. Whereas a knight, he's still learning his way, and some majority of the time, they just stay knights. They never really attain higher than that. Because personal flaws like, yes, 10,000 peasants are going to die, but at least I'm alive to defend more peasants. That's not really chivalrous, it's not really honorful of you. Whereas the king would say, I don't care if I die, I must help them. But the king and the knights know that their flesh is worth 10 times more that than any amount of peasants. This is why the peasants are ordered by the king to have high birth rates. This is why the peasants must have many children, because the king has to use them as more or less a meat shield to protect him while he charges through the ranks of the enemy. So, besides that, this has been just the origins and introductions of Bretonnian society. I hope you guys enjoyed. This has been a very lengthy video because I personally love Bretonnia, and I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys have any ideas as to what lore topics we should talk about, please say it down below, and leave a like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe, because after all, this channel hit 100 subs. We need more if we're gonna get bigger, and as always, I would love to do these videos more and more, but because I don't get paid, it's kind of hard for me to do that. So let's try to grow this channel up so that way I can really focus on you guys and meet your needs. Besides that, this has been Frieza700. I'm out. See you next time.